Hi, I'm Phil Palmer from Dire Straits Legacy, and you're watching and listening to Linea Rock.
Hello, Mr. Phil Palmer. Welcome to Milan and welcome to Linea Rock.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you here. This is a very special occasion since you're here promoting a special event for Telethon, which is going to take place at Teatro degli Arcimboldi in Milan on May 28th. How did you get in touch with them? How did this thing happen?
That's a good question. It came through our promoter, who is Riccardo Locatelli at the We For Show, and we were very interested in the project because the charity is for an amazing cause, and these are amazing people at Telethon.
Right. So this is not the first time for you, Phil, and also for Dire Straits Legacy to have a charity event. You did some in the past.
We like to do them occasionally, yes. Obviously, for the obvious reasons. Good causes.
And with Dire Straits Legacy, it's actually a celebration of Dire Straits music by some great artists like you, Phil, and also Alan Clark, Mel Collins, and Danny Cummings. You call it a concept band. What do you mean exactly by that? And how do you select the set list night by night?
Okay, it is a celebration of the songs of Mark Knopfler, in fact, played by the original members, as you just said, including myself, Phil Palmer, Mel Collins, who was the original sax player, Alan Clark, who was the original keyboard player, Danny Cummings, who was with me on every street tour, and the concept is just a celebration of Dire Straits music over the years. It started in various forms and has evolved over the last 4 or 5 years into what it is now.
Okay. And how did you get in touch with Marco Caviglia, which is an Italian, so we're proud of it.
True. Well, Marco was the catalyst really to bring everybody back together.
Okay.
Because since 1992, when the band actually broke up after the On Every Street tour, Mark Knopfler decided that he didn't want to do Dire Straits anymore. It run its course, so it served its purpose. And so Marco had a tribute band, a Dire Straits tribute band, and he gradually got in contact with all of us individually to come and do concerts with him as guests. And one of the first concerts we did was outside Rome, and in a small stadium, and we were surprised that 6,000 people showed up for that concert, and we kind of thought, well,
there's something happening here.
Yeah, there's still an amazing interest in the music of Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits. So we decided to take it a stage further, and here we are, basically.
You've done a lot of music in your career with a lot of different artists, but do you still consider Dire Straits like the highlight of your career?
It's certainly one of the highlights. It was a wonderful tour. It was Dire Straits at the time were probably the biggest band in the world. Although I'd just come from the Eric Clapton band, who I'd been touring with for the previous 2 years. So that was from 98 to 1991. And that was probably the best band in the world because of the personnel, the musicians inside that band were just astounding. And it was a great privilege to be playing with them, working with them, and Eric himself, who was a lovely guy. So yeah, I went from probably the best band in the world to the most successful band in the world overnight, really.
So how do you react and respond, to all the controversy of some fans, about the fact that, you're bringing the Dire Straits celebration back, but some people, is saying Mark is not there, so it's not fair. What do you respond to that?
Well, no, it's understandable that the purists out there decided that there's no Dire Straits without Mark Knopfler, and in some respects that's true.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to bring is as close as possible to the original concept of the original spirit and atmosphere of Dire Straits.
Yeah.
With the original guys,
Yes.
without Mark Knopfler, unfortunately. But it's pretty close, and I'm sure that everybody that loves the music of Dire Straits will appreciate what we're trying to do.
And what do Mark Knopfler think about this project? Did you ever talk to him about it? And did he ever come to a DSL show?
He hasn't yet.
Okay.
He's not against it. His fear is that it will live up to the standard of the original band, which was pretty high.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to achieve. We want to make it as good as it was, or in some cases better than it was, because of the new technology that we're using to recreate the wonderful music of Mark Knopfler.
As you already mentioned, you were in the band in an On Every Street period, last tour. Do you have any bittersweet memories? As you said, that was one of the biggest bands in the world, but that was, we know now, that it was the end of the band. So did you feel that? Or it actually came like, by surprise, and the fact that, it simply was maybe an hiatus that never ended, or how it was perceived by them?
I think all of us individually were busy doing other things anyway, apart from Mark and John. Mark didn't announce really that the band was finished at the end of that tour, so we didn't really know. It was a gradual sort of winding down of the project over the next few years. So I think he actually physically announced it in 1994. So there was a couple of years after the tour where we weren't sure what was going to happen. So.
Okay, so what's so magic about Dire Straits for you, Phil? And what do you perceive, as the people get from that?
The magic is Mark Knopfler's songs, to be honest with you. They are little snapshots of people's lives, and that's what we see coming back from audiences, is the emotion that they feel when they listen to those great songs, and the arrangements that evolved over the years of Dire Straits tours. The long arrangements of songs like 13 Minutes of Telegraph Road, etc. It's a journey, it's a movie, and that's what I think people really enjoy.
Was it any hard to work with Mark, and which was your contribution back in 90?
My contribution was really to, I suppose the brief was for me to play the parts, Mark's parts, guitar parts, as closely as possible while he couldn't play them. Because often there's more than one guitar part on Dire Straits songs. So when Mark is doing his licks or singing, it was my role was to fill in the whole.
Okay, and did you have any freedom on that? I mean, you tried to stick to the original, but I mean, he was like pretending a lot, or was like giving you freedom, since you are, a great guitarist?
There were 3 months rehearsal for the On Every Street tour, and it was intense.
Okay.
Mark is a perfectionist, and quite rightly, because he wants his songs delivered in the most the perfect way. I think that explains pretty much everything. The fact that we worked 3 months putting the set together, and it was a long process. For example, when I worked with Eric, we did 3 days rehearsal.
Okay, so very different.
It was a very different concept. But no, it was necessary, because those arrangements are quite complex, and to feel and to create the correct dynamics is the tough part. The songs themselves, technically, musically, are not that complicated, but the arrangements are.
Do you have any favorite songs from Dire Straits? Any song that get you more emotional, or any song that you think that artistically moves you more?
I think Private Investigations is always my favourite song. I still love to play that song today. I love to play them all, but that one especially because of the dynamics and the atmosphere that's created inside it.
Almost a prog song.
It's almost, it's a movie. Mark's songs are little movies.
Having Ray and Dave Davies of the Kinks as uncles is definitely the perfect initiation to rock and roll.
It certainly was for me. When I was very young, I suppose 6 or 7, they were already quite active, but the first form of the Kinks were called the Ravens.
Yeah.
And I used to go to see them when I was about 10, playing concerts around North London. And I got the bug right there. I mean, there was no competition for me. I knew what I wanted to be when I was very young. So, because it was a wonderful period for music. The early '60s in London was stupendous, really.
Do you have any particular special, maybe funny memory about those days with them, and that you want to share with us?
As a guitar player, I was Dave, the younger brother of Ray, was my hero, of course, because he was in a rock and roll band. He was only 17 himself. He was very young then, and he would bring in guitars for me to play and to try out, and he actually gave me my first electric guitar, which was a Vox Phantom, which is a marvelous thing. And he would invent things. He invented something which was very important to rock and roll, I think, in the early '60s, where he wanted a particular sound, and he could only get it from this little tiny amplifier, which was distorted. Distortion at that time was unheard of. Nobody knew what it was. But he used this little box, as a preamp.
Okay.
And he plugged the first amplifier into a bigger amplifier to make it louder. Because the problem with the small one was it sounded good, but it was too quiet. Okay. So he invented at that point something called the preamp, which became part of modern amplification. Yeah. And at the same time, probably, he invented heavy metal as well, because the sound was heavy metal. Yeah.
That was, very, I guess it was magic back then, because there was a lot of experimentation also in the sound. You couldn't, buy everything. You have to invent. So
yes, that's right, yes. Yeah. You couldn't make that noise before Dave kind of started doing it. Go, 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 go. Yeah. That was the start of heavy metal, really.
And you, Phil, started with the ukulele and jazz music. But from the ukulele to guitar, which was, the spark? Was for your uncles, or
sure,
it came from you also?
No, it has to come from my uncles. The ukulele is a great place to start playing a guitar, because it's obviously a 4-string instrument. It's small, and while your hands are evolving and growing, it's the perfect way to start. I would recommend it for any budding guitar player.
Since the 80s, you worked with a lot of Italian artists, from Baglioni, Battisti, Loredana Bertè, Marcella Bella, Ivana Spagna, Anna Oxa, Patti Bravo, Eros Ramazzotti, Luca Carboni, Renato Zero, Max Pezzali, Edoardo Bennato, among others. Okay, which was the best experience for you from an artistic point of view? And was it any different working in Italy, or all the music, the music of the world of music is the same in the end, working behind the scenes?
In 1980, I worked with Battisti for the first time, and I think it was my first Italian experience. I really enjoyed working with Lucio, because his songs were so intense and so deep. So yeah, Lucio, there was an interesting thing happening around that time, which was 1980. I was already quite involved in sessions at that point in London, around London. And I think that the session circuit had evolved to such a point where people from outside of the UK were interested because of the bands, the session bands that were evolving in London.
Okay.
And I think that's why Italian productions started bringing their productions to England. But there's no difference really apart from the language.
Okay.
Music is music and art is art, so the only difference was understanding the lyrics. The Italian language is a beautiful thing, even if you don't understand it.
Okay.
Which I still don't.
Oh, really? After so many years being here,
I can get the gist of it most of the time, but
okay.
I wouldn't say I'm a good Italian speaker yet.
But there's something magical about Italy for you. There must be, because you've been here very often. So the first connection was with Lucio Battisti?
Yes, I think
that was the first one. Con il nastro rosa you did the solo, I remember that.
That's right.
Great solo, I mean, that is like a trademark,
It became that. I had no idea
really
how successful it was. Yeah, it took, I think, 10 years before when I came back to Italy regularly to understand. I heard it on the radio and I thought, oh, that sounds
that's
like
me.
And it was, and the guy I was with, whose name was Fabrizio Intra, a lovely man, who used to be the head of A&R at Sony BMG.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, that's you, don't you understand what that means, that song? And he told me the history of it, that it had been a massive hit, and was still a sort of icon of Italian music.
Did you, I mean, it was like something that came easily for you? Did you work on that particular solo like long, or it was like natural thing that came?
It's purely improvised.
Oh, wow.
And it was done in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
I was working, well, Jeff Wesley was the producer of that record, and he called me on a Sunday and he said, can you pop in tomorrow to play some guitar on this track? And I said, well, I've got a dentist appointment at about midday, I think it was. And I said, I'll pop in for an hour and we'll see if we can get something done. And so I got there about 10:30, and he set the track running. Jeff and I used to play this game because he knew that I didn't read music at that point.
Okay.
So he would just say, we'd get a sound working and a nice noise on the guitar, and he would say, okay, here comes the track, play.
Wow.
And so it was purely inspirational, and it was. The great thing about that song is that the changes are so beautiful, that the chord shapes, the melody is so clean and so straight ahead, that it was a very easy thing for me to just play over. And we did 2 takes, and there's a crossfade. If you listen very carefully, there's a crossfade in between the two.
The two, okay.
Yeah, but it took 20 minutes probably.
Did you usually improvise in the studio, or that was like a kind of exception?
I think I played best when I was free to do things. I guess I became a quick learner, but to walk into a session and read a part was never my thing, and still isn't.
Yeah.
So by that time I had kind of established a network of people that I could work with. They didn't expect me to read anyway, and asked me to contribute something of myself.
You are now married with Numa, which is an Italian singer. So, what's about Italy that attracts you so much?
Well, Numa for a start. No, I'm living in Rome most of the time when I'm not traveling. So Rome is our base. Of course, the weather, the food, the atmosphere, the friendship, the tennis.
Okay.
I'm a mad tennis player.
Okay.
And I think that's a big attraction because I can play outside tennis every day.
Is it complicated for Dire Straits' legacy, to find time and place to actually rehearse, since you live, all in different. You live close to Marco, but all the other guys are not.
It's not complicated for rehearsal because everybody involved in this project knows the songs pretty well.
Okay.
We tend to do a run through of most of the songs the day before a concert, just to to tighten things up and to clarify certain points. But it's an easy thing to do in that respect. The problem is getting everybody in one place at the same time.
Okay. That's complicated.
But it can be, yeah. I mean, that's why the personnel inside the band change occasionally because, for example, John Ilsley was doing some gigs with us last year, and we had Pete Withers along as well. Just to keep the proper focus and the spirit of the original sound of the band. And it sounded very authentic with both of them. But the nucleus of the band is me, Alan, Mel Collins and Danny, the original four guys. And other people pop along from time to time. We had Jack Sony. Jack Sony was here with us in Milan a few years ago. And he actually, in this restaurant, he decided that he wanted to cook for everybody because he's a mad cook as well.
Okay.
So he spent the afternoon in the kitchen here and cooked food for everybody. It's a nice little family, and we had a lot of fun doing it.
Another magic of Italy, the food and and all the things that get around that.
Exactly.
You work a lot in the studio and on stage, of course. Which situation do you prefer, and which is the best of both worlds?
It's interesting that the two things are tied together, obviously.
Yeah.
I tend to find, well, historically over my career, it's the things that I try out live I use in the studio later when I've perfected them. So I think one feeds the other in a lot of ways. You get the inspiration from live, which you then refine and use in the studio. That's what I do. I don't know if everybody does that.
And you enjoy equally both situations?
Yeah, I think I do.
You work with all the greatest artists, Eric Clapton, as you already mentioned, Tina Turner, Bryan Adams, Bob Dylan, Frank Zappa, and George Michael. Which experience you still cherish the most, and do you have any special memory about George Michael to share with us?
What do I cherish? I mean, working with Eric Clapton in that band was magical. And we enjoyed a marvellous relationship, Eric and I. Eric was really free with me. He was very generous, and because the band was so good, we were able to adapt instantaneously. Yeah. As I said, there was very little rehearsal with the Eric Clapton band because everybody was listening to everybody else, and so things happened naturally. Arrangements would evolve over the space of 2 or 3 shows. There was one great moment with Eric when somewhere in South America he said, just before the gig, he said, "Does anybody know Badge, the song Badge by Cream?" And I said, I do. And going back to when I was 14, I remember sitting in front of the record player, listening over and over and again to the solo in Badge, which is a marvellous thing, and learning it, lifting up the stylus, going back, playing a bar, and gradually learning it on an acoustic guitar, which was pretty difficult. And I said, yes, I know Badge. And so we came to play it. I don't think we even rehearsed it very much. We may have gone through it in sound check or something. And Eric said, take the solo. And I played Eric's solo from the original Cream track. Wow. And there's this magical moment. I saw a video of it recently which popped up, which I hadn't seen before, of that moment. And there's a fantastic sort of moment of recognition between the two of us. Wow. It was a beautiful moment. And apart from that, George Michael, George is very, very sad that he's gone, but he was a complex character, and he again was a total perfectionist with his art, made it quite difficult to work with in certain occasions. Rehearsals would be endless with George, not particularly for the music, but just because he wanted everything to look and sound perfect.
Okay.
So there was a lot of technical issues with George, and you know, we would do 12-hour rehearsals, sort of production rehearsals.
So it was a sort of perfection, but different than Mark Knopfler's one.
Yeah, Mark's was total musical.
Okay.
But George's theme was the entire picture.
Okay.
You know, he would spend hours doing lights, you know, with us standing there.
We mentioned your uncles before from the Kinks, the Davies brothers, but you have such an important surname, you know. Do you have any relation with Carl Palmer or Robert Palmer? No, not at all. Okay, so different family.
Different family. The Davies were my mother's side of the family.
Okay.
And they were the musical lot.
But the father is not involved in it. Okay. In 1993, you founded Spin 1-2 with Paul Carra and Tony Levin and Steve Ferrone, which is now involved also in Dire Straits' legacy. And as a super group, indeed, you recorded a fantastic album of rock covers, from Hendrix to The Who, Led Zeppelin, when that wasn't a trend yet. So it was like, you've been pioneers in a sense. What didn't work out for that band? Why you split? I mean, it was like a project, you know, for one album since the beginning, or something didn't work?
It was a wonderful little thing. Again, that was an idea that was developed here in Milan with Fabrizio Intro. Okay. Because after the Dire Straits tour, I popped over to see Fabrizio, and he said, "Well, what do you want to do now?" He said, "Why don't you do a solo album?" I don't think I want to do a solo album, certainly not yet. And he said, "Well, come up with some ideas." I said, "Well, what about putting a great band together and just doing some covers?" And he said, "Okay, well, you organise it and I'll finance it." And he did. Okay. There was never a problem with the band. It was a great project, and we did it because everyone was so good. I think we spent a week in the studio doing everything. Wow. And then really quick? Yeah, very quick, yeah. And the problem, again, with that band was that everybody was so busy individually, was getting everybody together in one place at the same time. And that has been, we've been trying to do Spin 1-2 too. But to find everybody available at the same time is absolutely impossible. You know, everybody's got their own things going. At the moment, Steve Ferrone is with Tom Petty touring America. Paul Carrick has been very successful on his own and working with Eric Clapton. I don't know if you knew that. And Tony Levin is Tony Levin. Yeah, so that's the problem. We talk about it every year. Oh, really? Yeah. I spoke to Paul Carrick about 2 weeks ago. I said, "Listen, can you give me 2 weeks sometime in 2017 when we can go into a studio and do Spin 1-2-2?" He said, "Well, I think I've got 4 days in July." And I said, "Well, you know." But that was, anybody else wasn't available. Exactly. Steve's on tour with Tom Petty. Okay, so Tony Levin is being Tony Levin. You know, it's a nightmare. But I think one day, with all the new technology and the stuff you can do online, and you know, you send files to people, I think it could happen this year. So the first album was twice as magical, because that was a fantastic record, and you found, you know, yourself in the same studio at the same time. That was wow. It's interesting. You mentioned Private Investigation before, because you consider it a very movie sort of song. But in 1987, you worked on a soundtrack for Full Metal Jacket, and in 97 you did it again in Italy for Tre uomini e una gamba, Italian movie. Is the artistic approach any different when it comes to soundtracks for a movie? Is it a different work in progress? It is, because you have something visual to work from. Okay. And I really enjoy the process, because just looking at a section of film, it gives me at least some concept of the atmosphere that's required musically. So it's a good starting point for me. It inspires me. So
And it's something that would you do again? Or?
Oh, I'd love to do it. I'm very keen to do another film score.
But you wait for the call. You don't research for.
Well, I haven't gone looking for it really. I've put a few feelers out over the last few years, but it's quite complex to actually achieve that. But I hope to someday.
You really gave a lot to the music world as a session man and composer, but you always preferred to hide behind, other big names, not putting yourself in front. Was that a precise choice, and why that? You mentioned that somebody, told you, let's make a solo album, but you prefer to do Spin 1-2 instead. So it's something that you're kind of shy, or what is it?
Not now. I think I probably was. But no, I'm not shy anymore. I'm not sure that there's so many great guitar players doing solo albums. Jeff Beck and
yes.
I may do a solo album someday, but it would be on my terms and my idea. I mean, I don't want to just do a kind of jazz funk show-off kind of album. It's not me. Although I have an idea to do something orchestral. With an electric guitar taking the main themes, which I'm working on.
But was that, working like this, was it simply a choice, or it simply happened, that you were called from?
I'm a session man, that's where I started.
That was your idea in your...
That's what I am.
Yeah.
I'm good at interpreting the ideas of other people. I guess that's why I'm still doing it after 40 years. And I feel comfortable with that.
And concerning this, is it easier or harder working like this? I mean, what's the hardest part, to put a lot of yourself in everything you do, or on the other hand, to put your art at the complete service of every new partner that you find in the studio? It's a matter of shaping them, or shaping yourself, or actually do whatever you want without their, being aware of it. I don't know. It's because you've done such different things.
Yeah,
so.
that I think is the art. Is to make a contribution when it's required, and to not make a contribution when it's not required.
Okay.
And there's two very different ways of looking at it. For example, working with George as a guitar player is pretty unrewarding, because you're never really expected to leap out and play a solo, apart from maybe Faith. But that was a pretty close interpretation of what he did originally. So staying out of the way with George was often the thing to be.
Okay. Last question. What's next for you? And do you have any word of advice to young musicians that would like to do a career like you did?
The advice I give to young guitar players, at least, is to play with other people. It's good to practice at home on your own to learn scales and stuff like that, but you don't truly learn how to play music until you start working with other people.
Yeah.
Because the last thing that anybody wants is for you to show off, is to play too much. It's a recipe for disaster if you walk into a session or a studio or live and just play too much. You must be sensitive.
Good balance. Yeah.
Sensitivity is the key for me.
Okay, in everything.
Well, certainly music.
Okay, so what's next after this Dire Straits Legacy concert for you?
Okay, various things. I'm doing some more shows with Eros over the summer, Eros Ramazzotti. I think mostly corporate shows, but Pete Townshend's been on recently to do something orchestral, which sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've worked with Pete quite a lot and I love him. He's a genius. Spin 1-2 could happen this year, we hope.
Well, okay, finger crossed.
And we're recording songs for the Legacy as well.
Oh wow, so you have a record coming out at Dire Straits Legacy?
I think we'll probably release a single over the summer.
Will it be covers of Dire Straits
No.
rearranged or your own
No,
songs?
it's new songs.
New songs.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
It
You
is.
want to tell us more about it?
Sure. Alan and I got together and we went to Los Angeles for a few weeks back in November. And we spent some time with Steve Ferrone and Pino Palladino in a small studio, and we put together 5 songs, which we've been developing ever since. We brought the tracks back, and we got Marco Caviglia to sing on them. So there's a thread.
Yeah.
The songs are in the style of Dire Straits, but not Dire Straits songs.
Okay. But yeah, well, we're looking forward to have a listen to it, and will it come out like pretty soon? Summer, end of the summer?
We were talking about it yesterday because we're going to South America in May, and we want to have something ready. I think a single to promote while we're there, so it's going to be soon.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Phil, for your time and for this interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Nice questions, thank you.
Thank you so much.